In the heart of Lagos, where the city's pulse thrummed with hope and desperation, St. Agatha's Hospital stood as a beacon of promise. Its sign, a place of hope, gleamed under the sodium glow of streetlights, but beneath its polished facade lurked a darkness that preyed on the vulnerable. On a humid May night in 2025, Mercy Okeke, a 24-year-old seamstress with eyes like polished ebony, lay in the maternity ward, her body racked with the pains of labor. Her husband, Chidi, a 28-year-old mechanic with calloused hands and a heart full of faith, gripped her hand, his whispered prayers mingling with her labored breaths. A rosary dangled from Mercy's fingers, its beads worn smooth by years of devotion. The ward was a cacophony of life and struggle, newborn cries, the hum of a faltering generator, and the shuffle of nurses' feet. The walls, painted a sickly green, peeled at the edges, betraying the hospital's neglect. Mercy's heart swelled with anticipation. Twins, the doctor had said. A double blessing, her mother had called it, a gift that ran in their family like a river through the earth. She could feel them, her babies, stirring within her, ready to meet the world. Matron Rose, a stern woman in her 50s with a smile that never reached her eyes, hovered nearby, her clipboard clutched like a shield. "Mrs. Okeke," she said, her voice smooth as palm oil, "you're doing well." "Twins, eh? Special babies need special care." Mercy, panting through a contraction, managed a weak smile. "My mother said the same," she murmured, clinging to Chidi's hand. Matron Rose's eyes flickered, a shadow passing over them, but she nodded and turned away, her steps too brisk, too purposeful. As the labor intensified, Mercy's screams echoed through the ward, a primal song of creation and pain. Chidi's prayers grew louder, his voice trembling with love and fear. Hours bled into eternity until, at last, the first baby emerged, a girl, tiny and perfect, her cries piercing the night. Mercy wept as the nurse placed the child in her arms, wrapped in a faded blue cloth. "Ada," she whispered, naming her after her grandmother, whose strength had carried their family through hardship. Chidi's eyes glistened, his fingers brushing Ada's tiny hand. "Our miracle," he said, his voice thick with awe. Then came the second, a boy, his cries softer but no less alive. Matron Rose lifted him, swaddled in white, and held him just out of Mercy's reach. "This one needs a quick check in the neonatal unit," she said, her tone too calm, too rehearsed. "Low oxygen levels. Nothing to worry about." Mercy's heart lurched. "Low oxygen," she rasped, struggling to sit up. "But I heard him cry." "Let me see him, please." Chidi's brow furrowed, his instincts prickling, but Matron Rose's smile was unyielding. "Trust us, Mrs. Okeke. We're professionals." Before Mercy could protest, the matron swept out of the room, the boy's faint cries fading down the hall like a receding tide. In the hospital's basement, far from the maternity ward's chaos, a different scene unfolded. Dr. Femi Adeyemi, the hospital's director, sat in a cluttered office, his charismatic smile masking a heart as cold as the steel desk before him. At 40, he was a man of influence, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the hospital's decay. Matron Rose entered, the baby boy cradled in her arms, his whimpers barely audible. Across from Dr. Femi sat Mr. and Mrs. Ibrahim, a wealthy couple in their 50s, their faces alight with desperate hope. They had waited years for a child, their wealth unable to fill the void in their hearts. "Meet your new son," Dr. Femi said, his voice dripping with charm. Healthy, strong, a perfect match. Mrs. Ibrahim's eyes filled with tears as she reached for the baby, her fingers trembling. He's beautiful, she whispered, cradling him close. Her husband slid a briefcase across the desk, its contents, 5 million naira in crisp notes, gleaming under the fluorescent light. As agreed, Mr. Ibrahim said, his voice low. Discreet as promised. Dr. Femi's smile widened as he inspected the cash. Ensure the paperwork is clean, he told Matron Rose. No traces. She nodded, her face a mask of compliance, though a flicker of guilt shadowed her eyes. The mother's sedated, she said. She'll be told the boy didn't make it. Dawn crept through the ward's cracked windows, casting a pale glow over Mercy's bed. She lay still, Ada sleeping in her arms, the baby's warmth her only anchor. Chitty sat beside her, his face drawn, his hands clasped in silent prayer. Matron Rose returned, her expression heavy with feigned sorrow. Mr. and Mrs. Okeke, she said softly, I'm so sorry. Your son, he didn't survive. His heart was too weak. The words struck Mercy like a physical blow, stealing her breath. She clutched Ada tighter, her body trembling. No, she whispered, her voice breaking. I heard him cry. I felt him. Chitty stood, his voice raw with grief. You said he just needed a check. How does this happen? Matron Rose averted her eyes, her words hollow. Sometimes, these things are beyond our control. Mercy's sobs erupted, a torrent of anguish that shook her frail frame. She rocked Ada, her cries filling the ward, a mother's heart shattered. My Obi, she screamed, naming the son she would never hold. My boy. Give him back to me. Chitty collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down his face, his hands helpless against the weight of their loss. Other mothers in the ward turned away, some weeping, their own fears mirrored in Mercy's pain. The rosary slipped from her fingers, clattering to the floor, its beads scattering like her broken dreams. Outside, a sleek black SUV glided away from the hospital's side entrance, its tinted windows hiding the Ibrahims, and the baby boy, now dressed in clothes that cost more than Mercy's yearly earnings. The hospital's sign loomed above, its promise of hope a cruel mockery. Inside, at the nurse's station, Chioma, a young nurse in her 20s with a heart too soft for the hospital's secrets, overheard a whispered exchange. Another twin gone, one nurse muttered, her voice laced with unease. Chioma's eyes narrowed as she glanced at a file labeled Okeke, Mercy. The neonatal report was sparse, its details inconsistent. Her pulse quickened. This doesn't add up, she murmured, slipping the file into her bag, her resolve hardening like iron. A week later, in a modest home in a Lagos suburb, Mercy sat on a worn couch, staring at a wall adorned with photos of her and Chitty's wedding. The room was heavy with grief, the air thick with unspoken pain. Ada slept in a crib nearby, her soft breaths a fragile reminder of life. Chitty entered, carrying a tray of yam porridge, his eyes etched with worry. Mercy, you need to eat, he said gently. For Ada. For us. Mercy's voice was hollow, her gaze distant. I see him, Chitty. Every night, I hear him crying. They took him. I know it. Chitty knelt beside her, his hand warm against hers. It was a tragedy, my love. But we have Ada. We have to be strong. Mercy's eyes blazed, her grief igniting into something fierce. No, Chitty, she said, her voice trembling with conviction. He's alive. I feel it in my soul. I won't rest until I find him. Her words hung in the air, a vow etched in pain. A knock at the door broke the silence. Chitty opened it to find Chioma, her face pale, her hands clutching the stolen file. Mrs. Okeke, she whispered, her voice trembling with courage, I work at St. Agatha's. I think your son was taken. Mercy's heart stopped, her gasp a spark in the darkness. The world tilted, and in that moment, her grief became a fire, a mother's unyielding resolve to reclaim her stolen light. The air in Mercy Okeke's small living room hung heavy, thick with the weight of Chioma's words. I think your son was taken, the young nurse had said, her voice a trembling thread in the dim light of the Lagos evening. Mercy's heart pounded, a drumbeat of hope and dread, as she stared at the file Chioma clutched, a thin sheaf of papers that held the fragile promise of truth. Chitty, his face carved with worry, stood frozen by the door, his eyes darting between his wife and the nervous stranger who had appended their grief. Ada, their infant daughter, slept in her crib, oblivious to the storm brewing around her. Mercy's hands shook as she took the file, her fingers brushing the rough edges of the stolen hospital record. The words blurred before her eyes, neonatal report, oxygen levels, time of death, but one detail stood out, sharp as a blade. The report claimed Obi, her son, had never left the delivery room. Yet Mercy remembered Matron Rose carrying him away, his cries echoing down the hall. This is a lie, she whispered, her voice raw. They said he was in the neonatal unit. Why does it say he never left? Chioma's eyes, wide with fear, met hers. I've seen other files like this, she said softly. Twins, triplets, some babies just disappear. The reports are always wrong. Chitty stepped forward, his voice tight. Disappear? What are you saying? That the hospital is stealing children? Chioma nodded, her lips trembling. I don't have proof, not yet. But I've heard whispers, nurses talking, doctors meeting in secret. St. Agatha's isn't what it seems. Mercy's grief, once a crushing weight, ignited into something fierce. She clutched the file to her chest, her eyes blazing. My Obi is alive, she said, her voice a vow. And I will find him. In the days that followed, Mercy transformed. The hollow-eyed mother who had stared at walls gave way to a woman driven by purpose. She pored over the file, memorizing every word, every discrepancy. At night, when Chitty thought she slept, she lay awake, tracing the memory of Obi's cry, her heart whispering that he was out there, waiting. Chitty, torn between hope and caution, begged her to be careful. Mercy, these people, if they're doing this, they're dangerous, he said, his hands gripping hers. But Mercy's resolve was iron. I'm his mother, she said. No one will fight for him like I will. Chioma, meanwhile, walked a razor's edge at St. Agatha's. The hospital's corridors, once familiar, now felt like a labyrinth of secrets. She noticed Matron Rose's sharp glances, the way Dr. Femi Adeyemi's charming smile faltered when he caught her lingering near his office. Determined to help Mercy, Chioma began eavesdropping, her heart pounding as she hid behind supply closets or lingered at the nurse's station. One night, she overheard Matron Rose speaking to a junior nurse, her voice low and urgent. "The next set of twins is due tomorrow. Make sure the paperwork is ready. No mistakes this time." Chioma's blood ran cold. She scribbled the words in a notebook, her hands trembling, knowing each step she took drew her closer to danger. Mercy, unable to sit idle, began her own investigation. She visited the hospital under the pretense of a follow-up for Ada, her eyes scanning every face, every door. The maternity ward, once a place of hope, now felt like a graveyard of stolen dreams. She noticed other mothers, their eyes haunted, clutching single babies where twins should have been. One woman, Esther, sat alone, her face etched with loss. Mercy approached, her voice gentle. "Did you lose a twin too?" Esther's eyes filled with tears. "They said my boy died," she whispered. "But I heard him cry." "I know I did." Mercy's heart clenched, her suspicion hardening into certainty. She wasn't alone. Back at St. Agatha's, Dr. Femi sensed the ripples of unrest. In his basement office, surrounded by files and the faint hum of a generator, he met with Matron Rose, his voice sharp. "We can't afford mistakes," he said, his eyes narrowing. "That Okeke woman was here again, asking questions. And your nurse, Chioma, she's too curious." Matron Rose, her face tight, nodded. "I'll handle Chioma. As for Mrs. Okeke, we'll give her something to grieve over." Dr. Femi's smile was cold, a predator's glint. "Good. We have clients waiting. The next twins are already spoken for." Mercy's search led her to a local journalist, Tund, a grizzled man in his 40s who ran a small blog exposing corruption. She found him in a crowded Lagos market, his stall cluttered with notebooks and a battered laptop. "I need your help," she said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. She handed him Chioma's file, her eyes pleading. "My son was stolen. And I think others were too." Tun's brow furrowed as he skimmed the pages, his expression darkening. "This is big," he said. "But dangerous. If St. Agatha's is trafficking babies, they'll have powerful friends." Mercy's jaw tightened. "I don't care. I want my son back." Tund agreed to investigate, but warned her to stay low. "These people don't play games," he said. "If they know you're digging, they'll come for you." Mercy nodded, but her heart burned with defiance. She returned home to find Chitty pacing, his face pale. "Someone was here," he said, his voice shaking. "They left this." He held up a note, scrawled in red ink, "Stop looking, or Ada will be next." Mercy's knees buckled, her breath catching. She clutched Ada's crib, her tears falling onto the baby's blanket. "They can't have her," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They can't have my girl." That night, extra info, Mercy couldn't sleep, her mind racing. She sat by Ada's crib, the file open in her lap, when her phone buzzed. It was Chioma, her voice a frantic whisper. "Mercy, I found something," a ledger in Dr. Femi's office. It lists babies, dates, payments. Your son's name is there. He's alive, Mercy, but they're moving him soon. Mercy's heart soared and shattered all at once. Where? She demanded, her voice trembling. Chioma hesitated, her breath hitching. I don't know yet. But I'm being watched. Be careful, Mercy. They know you're asking questions. As the call ended, Mercy sat in the dark, her tears falling silently. She looked at Ada, her tiny chest rising and falling, and felt a mother's love sharpen into a weapon. Obi was out there, alive, and she would tear the world apart to bring him home. But the note's warning echoed in her mind, a shadow creeping closer. Outside, the Lagos night hummed with life, unaware of the battle unfolding in one woman's heart. The Lagos night pressed against Mercy Okeke's small home, its humid air heavy with secrets. Inside, the dim glow of a lantern cast flickering shadows across the living room, where Mercy sat by Ada's crib, her daughter's soft breaths a fragile tether to hope. Chioma's whispered call echoed in her mind, your son's name is there. He's alive, but they're moving him soon. The words were a lifeline and a wound, fueling Mercy's resolve while tightening the knot of fear in her chest. The threatening note, stop looking, or Ada will be next, lay crumpled on the table, its red ink glaring like blood. Mercy's fingers traced Ada's blanket, her heart pounding with a mother's fierce vow. No one would take her girl, and she would bring Obi home. Chidi, his face etched with exhaustion, paced the room, his voice low but urgent. Mercy, we can't keep doing this alone. These people, they're not just doctors. That note means they're watching us. Mercy's eyes, red from sleepless nights, met his. I know, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. But Obi is alive, Chidi. I feel him, like I feel Ada. I can't stop now. Chidi knelt beside her, his hands cupping her face. Then we fight together, he said, his voice breaking. But we need help, Mercy. Real help. Their hope rested on Tund, the grizzled journalist whose blog had exposed petty corruption, but never a scandal this dark. Mercy met him at dawn in a cramped tea shop near the Lagos market, the air thick with the scent of Accra and diesel. Tund's eyes, shadowed by sleeplessness, scanned the stolen file and Chioma's scribbled notes about the ledger. This ledger, he said, his voice low, it's the key. Names, dates, payments, it could blow St. Agatha's apart. But getting it won't be easy. Chioma's in deep, and they're onto her. Mercy's heart clenched. She's risking everything for us, she said. We have to protect her. Tund nodded, his jaw tight. I've got a contact in the police, Inspector Amina. She's clean, hates corruption. If we can get her the ledger, she'll move on it. At St. Agatha's hospital, Chioma moved like a ghost, her every step shadowed by fear. The maternity ward's faded green walls seemed to close in, the hum of the generator a constant reminder of the hospital's decay. Matron Rose's eyes followed her, sharp as a hawk's, and Dr. Femi's once charming smile now carried a warning. Chioma knew she was being watched, but the ledger's existence burned in her mind. She had glimpsed it in Dr. Femi's office, a leather-bound book hidden in a locked drawer, its pages listing babies like commodities. Obi's name, paired with a date and a six-figure sum, had seared itself into her memory. Late one night, as the hospital quieted, Chioma seized her chance. Slipping into the basement corridor, she used a stolen key to enter Dr. Femi's office, her heart hammering. The drawer yielded to a paperclip and desperation, revealing the ledger. Her hands trembled as she photographed pages with her phone, each click a step closer to justice and danger. Names, dozens of them, stretched back years, twins, triplets, sold to wealthy clients in Nigeria and beyond. As she snapped the final photo, footsteps echoed outside. Chioma froze, shoving the ledger back and ducking under the desk. Matron Rose entered, her voice cold on a phone call. "The Okeke woman's getting too close. We need to end this. And that nurse, Chioma, she's a problem." Chioma's breath caught, her body trembling as Matron Rose left, unaware of the eyes watching from the shadows. Mercy, meanwhile, sought allies among the hospital's victims. She returned to the maternity ward, finding Esther, the mother who had lost a twin. In a quiet corner, Esther's story spilled out, her son, declared dead, but his cries haunting her dreams. "I went back to ask questions," Esther whispered, her eyes hollow. "They threatened my family. Said I'd lose my daughter too." Mercy's heart ached, her own fear mirrored in Esther's face. "We're stronger together," Mercy said, her voice fierce. "Help me find the others. We'll make them pay." Esther hesitated, then nodded, a spark of courage igniting. By week's end, Mercy had gathered 3 more mothers, their shared grief forging a fragile alliance. Tun's investigation bore fruit when Inspector Amina agreed to meet. In a nondescript office near the police station, Amina, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s, listened as Tund laid out the evidence, Chioma's notes, the stolen file, and Mercy's testimony. "This is explosive," Amina said, her eyes narrowing. "But without that ledger, it's just hearsay. Get me hard proof, and I'll raid St. Agatha's myself." Tund nodded, but his stomach churned. Chioma was their only link to the ledger, and time was running out. At the hospital, Dr. Femi's patient snapped. In his basement office, he confronted Matron Rose, his voice a low growl. "Chioma's been in my office. I found a paperclip by the drawer. She's got something, and I want her gone." Matron Rose, her face pale, nodded. "I'll handle it. But the Okeke woman, she's rallying other mothers. We need to move the babies now." Dr. Femi's eyes glinted, cold and calculating. "Arrange a transfer tonight. And make sure Chioma doesn't leave this hospital." That evening, Chioma's shift ended, but as she reached the staff exit, 2 security guards blocked her path. "Dr. Femi wants a word," one said, his grip tight on her arm. Panic surged, but Chioma's resolve held. She slipped her phone into her pocket, the photos of the ledger still on it, and sent a frantic text to Tund, "They've got me. Ledger real. Help." As the guards dragged her to the basement, Chioma's heart pounded, her thoughts of Mercy and Obi giving her courage. Mercy, at home, felt a chill she couldn't explain. She sat by Ada's crib, the threatening note now taped to the wall, a reminder of the stakes. Her phone buzzed with a call from Tund, his voice urgent. "Chioma's in trouble. She got photos of the ledger, but they've caught her. I'm meeting Amina now." Mercy, stay safe, they're moving Obi tonight. Mercy's breath caught, tears spilling down her cheeks. She looked at Ada, then at Chitty, who stood ready, his eyes fierce with love. "We're going to the hospital," she said, her voice trembling but unyielding. "I'm getting my son back." As they left, the Lagos sky darkened, a storm brewing over the city. Mercy clutched Ada close, her heart a wildfire of hope and fear. Somewhere in St. Agatha's, Obi waited, and Chioma fought for her life. The shadows of courage were rising, but the cost of truth loomed ever closer. The Lagos sky churned with storm clouds, thunder rumbling like a warning as Mercy Okeke stepped out into the night, her daughter Ada cradled close. Her heart was a wildfire, burning with the knowledge that her son, Obi, was alive, his name scrawled in a ledger of stolen lives. Tun's call had set her in motion. Chioma, the brave nurse who risked everything, was trapped in St. Agatha's hospital, and Obi was being moved tonight. Chitty walked beside her, his face set with determination, his hand gripping hers. "We'll bring him home," he said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. Mercy nodded, her tears mingling with the first drops of rain. For Obi, for Ada, for every mother robbed of their child, she would face the darkness. At St. Agatha's, the hospital loomed under the storm's shadow, its sign, a place of hope, a cruel lie. In the basement, Chioma sat bound in a storage room, her wrists raw from coarse rope. The two security guards who had dragged her there stood watch, their faces impassive. Dr. Femi Adeyemi entered, his tailored suit pristine, his eyes cold as steel. "You should have stayed quiet, Chioma," he said, his voice smooth but laced with menace. "Where are the photos?" Chioma's chin lifted, her fear tempered by defiance. "You'll never erase what I saw," she said, her voice trembling but unbroken. "Obi's mother knows. Others know. You can't hide forever." Dr. Femi's smile was a predator's, chilling in its calm. "Then we'll bury the truth with you." Above, in the maternity ward, Matron Rose oversaw the transfer. A van waited at the hospital's side entrance, its engine idling. Inside, 3 infants, 2 sets of twins and Obi, lay in makeshift cradles, their cries muffled by sedatives. Matron Rose's hands trembled as she checked the paperwork, her face a mask of duty hiding a flicker of shame. She had justified this work for years, saving the hospital, helping desperate couples, but Chioma's courage and Mercy's pain had cracked her resolve. As she handed the baby's files to a driver, her eyes lingered on Obi, his tiny face so like Ada's. For a moment she hesitated, but the driver's impatient grunt pulled her back. "Move fast," she said, her voice hollow. "The clients are waiting." Mercy and Chitty reached the hospital as the storm broke, rain lashing the streets. Tund met them at the entrance, his face grim. "Amina's on her way with a team, but we can't wait. Chioma's in danger, and the babies are leaving now." Mercy's heart pounded, her eyes scanning the hospital's facade. "Where's Obi?" she demanded, her voice fierce. Tun pointed to the side entrance. "The van. They're loading it now." Mercy clutched Ada tighter, her body trembling with resolve. "I'm going in," she said. Chitty grabbed her arm. "Mercy, it's too dangerous." She turned to him, her eyes blazing. "He's my son, Chitty. I'd walk through fire for him." Chitty's face softened, his love overriding his fear. Then we go together. Inside, Mercy's group of mothers, Esther and 3 others, joined them, their shared grief a quiet strength. They slipped past the reception, the hospital's corridors eerily silent under the storm's roar. Tun led them to the basement, guided by Chioma's last text. As they descended, Mercy's breath caught, her heart whispering Obi's name. At the storage room, they found the guards. Chitty, fueled by desperation, tackled one, while Tun subdued the other with a wrench from his bag. Mercy burst in, finding Chioma bound but alive, her face bruised but defiant. Mercy, Chioma gasped as Mercy untied her, the baby's, side entrance. Hurry! Outside, the van's engine roared to life. Mercy sprinted through the rain, her lungs burning. Ada clutched to her chest. Chitty and the mothers followed, their shouts lost in the storm. As the van began to pull away, Mercy threw herself in its path, her scream piercing the night. Stop! That's my son. The driver hesitated, his eyes wide, but Matron Rose, standing nearby, barked, "Go." Before the van could move, Inspector Amina's police truck screeched into the lot, lights flashing. Officers swarmed, pinning the driver and blocking the van. Amina, her face stern, approached Matron Rose. "It's over," she said, her voice cutting through the rain. Matron Rose's shoulders sagged, her defiance crumbling. Mercy tore open the van's door, her heart stopping as she saw the infants inside. Her eyes locked on one, a boy, his tiny face so like Ada's, his chest rising faintly. "Obi," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. She lifted him, her arms trembling, and pressed him to her heart, his warmth erasing weeks of pain. "My boy," she sobbed, rocking him as the rain soaked them both. Chitty wrapped his arms around them, his tears mingling with hers. Ada stirred, her tiny hand brushing Obi's, a family reunited in the storm's embrace. In the hospital, Amina's team arrested Dr. Femi, his charm shattered as he was led away in cuffs. The ledger, recovered from Chioma's phone, listed dozens of stolen children, its pages a map of Saint Agatha's sins. Matron Rose, her face ashen, confessed, her voice breaking as she named accomplices, corrupt officials, wealthy clients, a network spanning borders. Chioma, bruised but unbroken, stood with Tund, her courage the spark that had ignited justice. The mothers, Esther and the others, clung to hope, their own searches just beginning, fueled by Mercy's victory. Days later, Mercy sat in her living room, Obi and Ada asleep in her arms. The room, once heavy with grief, now hummed with life. Chitty sat beside her, his hand warm on hers. "You did it," he said, his voice thick with pride. Mercy's eyes glistened, her heart full yet scarred. "We did it," she said softly. "For Obi, for Ada, for all of them." Outside, Lagos bustled, its chaos undimmed, but in that small home, a mother's love had reclaimed the light. The storm had passed, but Mercy knew the fight wasn't over. Other mothers still searched, other children still waited. She looked at her twins, her resolve unbroken. For them, for all the stolen, she would keep fighting, a beacon of hope in a city of shadows.